Am I audible and visible? Okay, so this is a class on English prosody. In the last class, we have already discussed things like syllable, accent, stress. We have also discussed the steps that can be followed while scanning a poem, such as identifying multisyllabic words in a passage, identifying certain parts of speech like nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And we also looked at some examples. We did a couple of reading exercises. Today we are going to talk about different kinds of meters and variations. But before that, I would like to recapitulate what we did in the last class. Uh, we talked about how poetry is composed of not just words but also words arranged in a certain order whereby rhythm is produced. And I made you look at several examples. Um, we discussed monosyllabic words and multisyllabic words, and we also discussed how multisyllabic words are words that contain a combination of stressed and unstressed syllables. We also looked at certain accent rules, English accent rules, and I also shared a link with you uh, which enlists the 10 most important English accent rules. So today we are going to look at um, some passages, and we are going to scan them for their rhythmic structures. So before I begin, I would like to talk about meter or foot. Okay, I concluded the last class by pointing out that in English poetry there are basically two kinds of rhythms: the iambic rhythm and the trochaic rhythm. I hope the screen is visible to you. I'm using MS Word. So the iambic foot or the iambic meter looks like this. This is an unstressed syllable and this is a stressed one, and it's called iamb. As opposed to an iamb, you also have trochee. And correspondingly, you have two different kinds of rhythms, two opposite kinds of rhythms: the iambic rhythm and the trochaic rhythm. Okay. Now let's look at an example. We'll go straight to a passage, a poetry passage. A very famous example of an iambic passage. I'm sure all of you are familiar with this passage, this poem. Thomas Gray's Elegy, written in a country churchyard. So the first step involves identifying words which have more than one syllable, multisyllabic words. So the first multisyllabic word in the first line is this curfew. Let's isolate those words first, and then we will move on to the next step. You also have parting. In the next line, you have lowing, slowly. In the third line, you have plowman, homeward, weedy. These are the words which contain at least two sounds. Darkness. Note also the words such as leaves and lee have uh, several vowels, but do not confuse between vowels and vowel sounds. The word leaves, for example, contains several vowels, as you can see, but it contains just one sound. It's leaves. Okay, so that is something that you have to keep in mind while scanning poetic passages. You miss a syllable here, and then the whole structure, the rhythmic structure, falls apart. So our first step involves identification of multisyllabic words. We have done that. We have isolated words containing more than one syllable: curfew, parting, lowing, slowly, plowman, homeward, weary, darkness. All of these words contain two syllables. Okay, the next step involves isolating or identifying nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. Tolls, knell, day, heard, wind, lee, plods, way, leaves, world. That's all. We have the nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And now let's put the stress marks. So in the word curfew, where do you put the stress? You put it on U. It's curfew. Tolls, knell. These are monosyllabic words, and they will take the stress because they are important parts of speech. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. So let's deal with them first. That's done. Now look at the multisyllabic words. Curfew is already done. Parting, remember part is a root word. Ing is a suffix, so suffix A suffix can never take the stress, it's always unstressed. Same applies to lowing, slowly, li is a suffix. Plowman, homeward, weary, darkness. I missed out a word actually, this word, world. Okay, put the unstressed marks. It's easy. Those syllables which are not stressed are the ones that you should mark now. The is always unstressed. Right? Now read it once, twice, as many times as possible in order to identify the rhythm. I have already told you that there are two dominant rhythms in English poetry, the iambic rhythm and the trochaic rhythm. An iambic rhythm sounds like this: 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, and a trochaic rhythm sounds like this: 1 2 1 2 1 2. Right, so you have to identify which rhythm is dominant here, which rhythm comes across. I mean, which rhythm do you basically identify in the poem? Um, so the curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way, and leaves the world to darkness and to me. So this is a rhythm. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. So it sounds like an iamb, 1 2. The curfew tolls the knell, 1 2 1 2 1 2. It goes like that. So after having identified the rhythm, it is our responsibility to separate the iambs. You have to look for iambs in the lines. So where do you get the first iamb? You get it uh, here, the cur, and next you get few tolls. Then you have the knell of parting day. This is rather straightforward. There are a series of iambs, 5 iambs to be precise. So now it's time to isolate those iambs in the following way. So all you have to do is you have to draw a vertical line like this, and do it in such a way that you have iambs only. Okay, so how many divisions do you get? You get 5, right? So these are called feet, also meters. So you have 5 meters, right? And in each of those 5 meters there is an iamb. Let's look at the second line. Remember, we are out here to isolate the iambs. So you have an iamb here, the low, ing heard. So far so good, but then you have wind and slow, syllables which are both stressed. So what do? You cut it here. So you have two stressed syllables, and this is called a spondi. It's a variation. And then you have two unstressed syllables. So you may ask the question, why can't we break the line anywhere else? If we had put the vertical mark after li, after slowly, then we would have something like this: two stressed syllables followed by an unstressed one, and this does not exist in English poetry. So I give you a list of uh, forms or units or meters that are permissible. Okay, and I'll give you that list again. It's hardly any space. Okay, let's do it here. You have two unstressed syllables, and it's called pyrrhic. There isn't much space here, so I cannot write. So it's called pyrrhic. Pyrrhic. Two unstressed syllables, right? Pyrrhic. Then you have spondy, as I already pointed out. Of course, there is iamb, there is trochee, and corresponding to iamb, you have something like this. Sorry. Two unstressed syllables followed by a stressed syllable, which is called anapest. This goes with iambs. You find these in iambic passages only. And corresponding to um, trochees, you have something like this: one stressed syllable followed by two unstressed ones, which is called dactyl. So these are the permissible, these are the valid units that you get in English prosody, and you have to look for them while scanning a poem. So wind slow you can cut after that, but certainly not after li, because it would give you a form that is not accepted in English poetry. So you have to cut it here: wind slow, li, or. So we get a spondy first, and then we get a pyrrhic, and then you have a regular iamb, right? So let's look at the third line. The ploughman home, this is straightforward. Homeward plods his weary way. Okay. There is no variation in this line. Next line, there are variations: and leaves the world too dark. So far, so good. And then you have a series of a couple of pyrrhics, because these are not stressed really. Okay, so um, this is how it goes. Okay, so uh, this is an example of an iambic passage where you have lines dominated by iambs. If you scan those lines, you will find mostly iambs. The basic rhythm is iambic. The car, few tolls, the knell of part in day. I'm accentuating, I'm emphasizing the stressed syllables more than uh, the unstressed syllables. So I'm emphasizing, and the rhythm is quite apparent. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. These variations add to the, they embellish the lines, the sonic, the oral effect of the poem. Because otherwise it would tend to get very boring if you had the same iambic rhythm throughout the poem without any variation. So these are embellishments, these are variations that add to the beauty of the sound. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. Notice how uh, using uh, you know repeated accents using more stressed syllables in a line slows down the speed. When there are a lot of stressed syllables, you tend to go a bit slow. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way. There is no variation in this line. And then you have the and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Okay. So let's uh, count the number of feet or meters. The car is one, few tolls, two, the knell, three of part, four, ink day, five. 5 meters in the first line, 5 in the second, 5 in the third, and 5 in the fourth. So there are 5 meters, and this is therefore an example of a pentameter. Penta means 5. It's an example of iambic pentameter. Okay, that's a prosodic name of the poem, iambic pentameter. So um, it's an example of iambic pentameter, of course, but there are a few variations like, and you have to, while you are scanning a poem, after you have scanned a poem, you also have to write a statement, and you will have to refer to the variations that you have found in the passage, such as second line third foot, second line fourth foot. Second line third foot is a spondy, this one here, and second line fourth foot is a piddic. In the third line there is no variation. In the fourth line, fourth foot and the fifth foot, these 2 feet are pairing. So the statement that you write at the end of a scansion should look like this. The given passage is an example of iambic pentameter, or the prosodic name of the given passage is iambic pentameter, and it contains the following variations, and that after that you have to refer to the variations in the order that you have found them in the passage. Okay. Now let's look at a different example. A poem that you are familiar with, I hope. Let's identify the multisyllabic words. So these are the multisyllabic words in the poem, in the passage. Let's identify the parts of speech: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, mostly nouns and verbs. And then you have the step involving putting the stress marks on the stressed syllables: tiger, tiger, burning, bright, in the forests of the night. What immortal? Notice that mortal is a root word, im is a prefix, it is never stressed. So immortal, hand or eye, frame thy fearful symmetry. Symmetry is three syllables. The first syllable is stressed. Okay. Put the unstressed marks. Read the poem. Which rhythm do you find? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? So, after reading the passage a couple of times, it becomes clear that this is a trochaic rhythm. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. The very first line is very straightforward. It's a series of trochees, right? Tiger, tiger, burning bright. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. So we have to isolate the trochees. We can do that but by cutting after tiger and then again after tiger, burning and bright, which is a bit curious because it does not it's not a complete foot. Okay, it's incomplete. Okay, we will come back to this thing, this incomplete foot, but let's scan the other lines as well. In the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye? And then you have something rather strange in the fourth line. But before we uh, scan the last line, let's look at uh, the last foot in each lines, in each line, in the first three lines. Bright night eye. These are isolated, incomplete feet, and therefore they are not feet at all. They are incomplete. And if in a trochaic passage you have an incomplete foot, it's called catalectic. Okay, this is only for trochaic passages. Catalectics do not appear in iambic passages. So the idea is you have 1 2 1 2 1 2 1. This syllable, stressed syllable, is not followed by an unstressed syllable, so you cannot really consider this to be a proper foot. Okay, so this is a foot, this is a foot, and this is a foot as well, but not this. This is an example of catalectic. So if you have 3 meters, it's a trimeter. It's a trimeter catalectic, to be precise. If there is an incomplete foot containing one stressed syllable, it's called trimeter catalectic. So this poem, The Tiger by William Blake, in this poem you have some lines that are catalectic. 1 2 3, so trimeter catalectic. The second line as well is an example of catalectic, trimeter catalectic. 1 2 3, and then the incomplete foot. The third line as well. 1 2 3, and then the incomplete meter. Catalectic, trimeter catalectic. And then you have in the last line something very interesting. Notice that this is an iambic line. Could frame thy fearful symmetry. Could frame thy fear, 1 2 1 2, again full sim, 1 2, etri, piric. But if you do something with the word could here, suppose this is not there, then the line becomes trochaic, right? In fact, you have a dactyl here. Could frame, sorry, no could, frame thy fearful symmetry. So it's like tiger burning bright in the forests of the night. What immortal hand or eye frame thy fearful symmetry? Perfectly all right. So if you leave aside this could, if you cannot, of course, you cannot erase it out of the poem, but if you isolate it like this, separate it, then you have no problem whatsoever. You have a provision to do this, and it's called acephalous, which means literally headless. So let's identify the variations now. How many feet are there in each line? 3 in each line. So this is an example of trimeter, trochaic trimeter, right? With catalectic in the first 3 lines. And there are other variations as well. For example, in the second line, the first foot is a piric. I'll highlight the variations in each line. So you have no variations as such in the first line apart from the catalectic, the incomplete foot at the end of the line. In the second line, you have a pyrrhic. Remember, in a trochaic line, anything other than a trochee is a variation. In an iambic passage, anything other than an iamb is a variation. And you have to identify them, you have to mention them while writing the statement at the end of scansion. So in the is a pyrrhic, and of the in the third foot of the second line is a pyrrhic, and then you have the catalectic. What immortal hand or eye, the first foot is a pyrrhic, I is catalectic, could is acephalous, and then at the end of the fourth line you have something called a dactyl. A dactyl is a foot where you find one stressed syllable followed by two unstressed syllables. Okay, are there any questions? Let's look at the second stanza of the same poem. Distant, aspire, these are the only two multisyllabic words in this stanza. Let's look at nouns, verbs, adjective, verbs. Deeps, skies, burnt, fire, eyes, wings, dare, hand, dare, seas, fire. We are looking for trochees. We have to isolate them. We have to find as many trochees as possible. Variations. First line, first foot. Then you have the catalectic. I have made a mistake here. There is actually a dactyl here in the second line. Burn the fire of thine eyes. Third line, first foot, pedic, followed by spondy, and again pedic. Fourth line, fourth foot is a pedic, followed by a spondy. That's all. Notice that the second line contains only 2 meters, and you have to mention that in the statement. So, apart from the second line, the passage is composed of 3 meters, 3 meter, 3 meters followed by catalectics, and in the second line there is a catalectic, but there is a dactyl as well. Okay. Okay. I think we will stop here today, and in the next class we will be looking at some more examples. This is basically, yeah, so we will be looking at more examples, and today we discussed different kinds of rhythms, different kinds of meters, feet, and variations. So in the next class, we will be looking at several other examples, and examples which will be a bit more complicated. So I'm ending this live stream here. Thank you.